Welcome to Your Career Story podcast, a show that's designed for rockstar professionals looking for that extra booster shot of confidence in their careers. Whether you're trying to get clarity on a job transition, want some work-life balance inspiration, or need a strategy to snag that promotion or raise, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jenna Viviano, ex-Wall Streeter turned startup junkie who now coaches hundreds of clients, empowering them to take back control of the job search and land their dream job. So sit back, grab a glass of wine, and prepare yourself for your weekly boost of career confidence. Welcome to another episode of the Your Career Story podcast. This is season 2, and we are chatting all about work-life balance. And I have one of my dear friends, Kristi McLelland, on today, where she's going to be chatting with us all about Sabbathing. And this is something that, for me personally, this is actually the way I met you, Kristi.
Absolutely.
Was through your Sabbath class, because I was like, I'm not at rest. I need to be at rest.
And I wasn't either, which is why I taught it.
Which is why you taught it, right? Exactly. So why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do before we get started on all things Sabbath.
Man, first of all, thank you for having me today. It's so good to see you.
I know, it's been forever. We're used to our Tuesday afternoons or Tuesday mornings it's honestly been since last August that we were meeting every Tuesday.
Absolutely.
And then we just kind of stopped.
This is the first time with the microphone between us.
I know, this is true.
So here we go. So my name is Kristi McLelland.
Yeah.
I am a biblical culturalist, which means I teach the Bible through its historical, cultural, linguistic, and geographic context. Yeah. So I am a nerd.
Yeah, but we love you for your nerdisms.
Oh, I mean, it's all I've got. I've never been cool one day in my life. While you all were in cool school and doing things, I was reading, ancient archaeology or something somewhere.
Yeah. And so now you have a ministry called Newlands Biblical Studies, right? Is that what you call it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how did that birth?
So I've been a faculty member teaching Bible at Williamson College here in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm in my 14th year. Wow. Teaching Bible there.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And so 3 years ago, I've been taking teams to Israel for 11 years. God opened up the door 12 years ago for me to go study the Bible in Egypt and Israel. Okay. And I tell people all the time, I went to Israel and learned that God is better than I ever knew.
Yeah.
I thought he was awesome when I went.
Yeah.
And so it just started a brand new life trajectory for me 12 years ago. So for the past 11 years, I've been taking teams to Israel, Turkey, and Greece. Yep. We're launching Italy this year.
Oh, so fun.
I'm a visual, your people. That's right. That's right. You're coming with me on all of them eventually. But I'm a visual experiential learner. Yeah. And so studying the Bible where it happened fundamentally undid me in the best kind of a way. It was such a grace, such a shalom, such a revolution from within. I already had 3 years of seminary under my belt, was already teaching at a Bible college. And I just took the leap and embraced the mystery and said yes to the unknown and have been living in that the last 12 years. Yeah. But 3 years ago, we sort of formalized it and we launched Newlands Biblical Studies. Yeah. We are a teaching and taking tributary of Williamson College. Okay. So people from all over the world now can go and can study the Bible with us through a Middle Eastern lens.
That's so cool. I think for me, learning about it from that perspective made the Bible become 3D for me. I think that was the biggest thing that I learned because as a kid, like growing up, it was just really hard to connect with scripture. It was like, no matter what, like text I was reading or what book of the Bible was, it was just hard to connect to. But honestly, your class all of a sudden made the words fly off the page. And like the way that the Lord speaks through you and explaining stuff, it just totally changed my perspective of the Bible. And it made me, you call it, when we come to, it's not class, it's going to a feast. Can you unpack that for us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So as a culture, as an American culture, as a Western culture, we're infinitely more Rome and Athens than we are Jerusalem. Yeah. But the Bible was written by Middle Easterners in a Middle Eastern context. Yeah. And so we are curious. We want to know, we want to peer through and understand what they meant by what they wrote. Primarily what Jesus meant, what he said, what he did, how he lived his life, how he was showing us the pathway and the way of shalom, the way of the kingdom. And so I tell my students all the time, as Westerners, we approach the Bible in a very different way than the biblical world and the writers of the Bible and the participants in the biblical story. Yeah. We read the Bible and ask, what does it teach me about me?
Yeah, exactly.
They read the Bible and ask, what does it teach me about God?
Which that shift has made I actually asked that question. I have a Word at Work devotional, and that is the question I ask after every single one of the devotionals devotions is like, what does this teach me about God?
Absolutely.
First.
Oh, yes.
Because it sounds so silly, but I thought from I thought from Western lens. Like I thought, what does this teach me about me? It was very inward focused versus like automatically thinking, what does this teach me about the character of God? And that was such a mind shift for me.
Absolutely. And it takes you, we never simply read the Bible. We interact with it.
Sure.
It's living and so are we.
Yeah.
It's life on life.
Yeah.
It's life colliding with life.
Yeah.
And so when we come to the scriptures, we're asking questions of it without even knowing we're reading something.
Sure.
And inherently we're going, what did that look like? What did that mean? And what is that? And we just ask Western questions of the text, and Middle Easterners ask different questions.
Yeah.
You'll get depressed if you stare at yourself for too long.
Yeah.
But you'll get transformed if you stare at God. And so it's like, who are we staring at? Who are we gazing at? What are we beholding when we read scripture? And Psalm 19 talks about that the scriptures are sweeter than honey from the comb. And so that's why I call all of our series feasts. That we don't want to just read the word. We want to eat it together.
Yeah.
We want to take it in. Yeah. We want to let it do its work. Yeah. We want to let God do his work. And we want him to say what he wants to say, do what he wants to do. In Israel, when rabbis will come into the schools there with the little children, they'll lay down wax paper and they will put honey on it in reverence of that Psalm 19 passage. And they'll invite the children to take their finger and to taste the honey. And the rabbis will say, this is what the word of God tastes like. It is sweet. It is good for you. Yeah. Eat it, take it in, and let it do its work. It's not about the acquisition of knowledge. Sure. It's about posturing ourselves to receive.
Yeah. How do you do that? I know that's such a Western question even to say that. Like, how do you actually do that? Because if I think about myself, like I'm reading the Bible to acquire knowledge, to make my life better, or to make sure I'm following rules. That's where a lot of people I think fall into that trap. How do you posture yourself differently? And I think that kind of is a great segue into like, what does Sabbath actually look like too? Absolutely.
I think again, it's our approach. If we're looking for the law, the rule, the principle, that's the fill in the blank kind of approach to the scriptures. But the Middle Easterners, they approach the Bible like it's a story. Yeah. And who doesn't love a great story? Yeah. Stories change us. And so when we buy a novel to take to the beach on summer vacation, we don't have our highlighter. We're not sitting there making sure we're capturing the point on the page, so the way we would read another kind of a book. But the
scriptures too. I feel like with Bible study, and that's helpful sometimes for sure. But you're right. The highlighter is coming out.
And just taking in the story that God has given, is giving, and that we are in.
Yeah.
Like we are in this story. Yeah. We are finding him. We're finding ourselves in it.
Yeah.
And as we approach the scriptures, posture to receive, ready to eat the feast that God has prepared for us. It's almost the difference in an orphan and a son. An orphan scrounges, strives and strains to provide for themselves. And a son comes to the table confident that they have a father who is going to feed them.
Yeah. Well, that's super relevant even when we're thinking about careers, and even if something happens in our jobs or if something happens, it just in life in general, though, I have found myself over the past year really recognizing when the orphan spirit's coming and when the daughter spirit is coming, and orphan seems to win out way more often than I'd like it to. And so I think that what you had said when I was going through your course that I really loved about Sabbath is you have a phrase that you use to describe it. It's a celebration. Can you unpack that?
So when we think of Sabbath, I always begin the first feast with, asking everyone, when you think of Sabbath, what do you think of? And essentially I get two answers. One is rest and one is Sunday. Yeah. That's how we think of Sabbath.
Yeah.
But Sabbath, through that Middle Eastern eye, through that Middle Eastern lens, through the story of the Bible, it's always been a celebration of restoration. It is anchored in this deep and abiding truth that's given to us at the very beginning of the biblical narrative in Genesis 1, when our English Bibles read, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. There's another translation of that it became like a chaotic wasteland, like it's a mess.
Yeah.
And so what we think of as the creation account It's God restoring creation, him bringing order into the chaos and separating land from sea and sky. Yeah. The birds go here, the animals go there, the fish go there. Yeah. So one of the first things that we're learning about the living God is that when he sees chaos, he enters into it to bring restoration.
Yes, it's so good.
That when God puts his hands on something, he's not coming to judge, to smite, to beat, to ruin, to kill. He's coming to save, to restore, to renew, to put things right the way they were meant to be before the chaos, before the ruin. And so the seventh day in Genesis chapter 2, it's not called Sabbath until later, but it's this day of rest. Why? Because God was resting after restoring creation. It's his victory dance.
Yeah, so it's a celebration.
It is a celebration. So for the Jewish people, it's always been both. There's this Hebrew word, it's menuah, and it's a Sabbath word, and it carries this idea that the atmosphere of Sabbath is this restful celebration, not just utilitarian. I worked 6 days and now I need a rest.
Yeah, which is how that's how most of us adopt. Or like even myself, I think back to this past couple of months, we were just talking before we hit record about like the craziness of my past 3 months of work. And I'm like, now I'm going to take a sabbatical. Now I'm going to take a break versus operating out of rest completely and believing that God had me all along. I could have probably handled
That's right.
a little better.
That's right. Yeah. And Sabbath is a disruption of our regularity, if you think about it. And it's this invitation for us to cease our work. Sabbath in Hebrew, Shabbat, means to cease. So we cease our work so that we can be reminded of God's work, that he is restoring all things.
Yeah. So it's not a nap.
No.
It could include a nap, maybe.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But it's not a nap. I think that's a common misconception where it's like a lot of people are like, the idea of Sabbath too is it's in the 10 Commandments. You talk about that in the course of just how it's in the 10 Commandments. And we seem to like ignore that one as Westerners, as Americans. Oftentimes we're like, oh yeah, don't steal, don't lie, adultery, all those different things. But we kind of forget about the rest one. We kind of forget about Sabbath. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, it's number 4, by the way.
Yeah.
It's number 4 in the Decalogue. It's 4 out of 10. There's only 3 that come before it.
Yeah.
But our culture, our Western culture, our modern culture, it's a culture of scarcity. It is this idea, there's only so much, and I better get out there and I better work hard and I better get mine. And then once I've gotten mine, I better keep it. I better hold it. I better make sure no one takes it. And the culture of the kingdom is anchored in sufficiency.
Yeah.
It's there is enough. And we don't have to live like orphans. We can live out of our sonship.
Yeah.
And Sabbath is so much of that, because Sabbath is not just ceasing our work. It's anchored in observing and remembering. So for the Jewish people, Shabbat, Sabbath, begins Friday night at sundown. So I love that. Sabbath begins with the sun going down.
Yeah.
It begins entering into this posture of eating together and telling our God stories. Yeah. And then it ends at sundown on Saturday night. And it's this sacred place and space where we come together, you know, principally it begins with a meal.
Yeah.
And you tell your God stories. Yeah. You actively remember God's faithful record in your life thus far.
Yeah.
And that's what encourages you to live forward.
Yeah.
So it is this celebration. It's this remembering. And it really speaks into a culture of scarcity. Yeah. It reminds us of the kingdom culture of sufficiency.
Yeah.
We might even say abundance. And I'm not defining that as a BMW or a yacht or the you know, the 401k that's billions of dollars.
Abundance doesn't necessarily look how the American dream looks.
That's right. But it is, Sabbath is this reminding of a buoyancy of spirit in some ancient way. All is well because of who God is. Yeah. And in some ancient way, all will be well because of who God is. So we come together in this rhythm of this menuah, this restful celebration that you and your story, you've had a crazy last 3 months.
Yeah, totally.
I'm in my first year with 5 biblical study trips, managing more than I've ever managed.
Yeah.
And I find myself thinking about, I'm honestly trying to take God at his word. Yeah. Because the other interesting thing about Sabbath is, back to the utilitarian way that we tend to think of it. Sure. It's back to, I'm going to work 6 days and then rest. Yes. But Sabbath is the first day of the week.
Yeah.
So, I love that. God's invitation is for us to work out of our rest.
Sure.
Or from a place of rest.
Yeah.
Because again, it's working out of our sonship, working from our sonship, not working out of the orphan or working from the posture of the orphan. And it's interesting, the busier I get, because I'm in a world right now where new opportunities are coming.
Yeah.
I'm constantly meeting new people.
Yeah.
So lots of prayer, lots of walking, taking walks with Chester, my dog.
Who's underneath our feet right now.
Underneath our feet, chewing his bone. He's a part of this. He's praying while we talk about Sabbath. He's a Christian. I do read the Bible to him. But just, it's like, Lord, as the work increases, the Sabbath has to.
Yeah.
If I'm to be healthy, if the rhythm of my life, because we know that our bodies are made in a rhythmic nature.
Yeah.
We're awake, we sleep.
Yeah.
We need food.
Yeah.
Women have a menstrual cycle.
Yeah,
like
totally.
our physical bodies are rhythmic, but
Yeah.
our souls are rhythmic.
That's
And
good.
Sabbath is about tuning in. Abundance is not something we acquire. It's something we tune into. The flourishing is here. The kingdom of God is coming to the ground every day in beautiful and in manifold ways. And so we don't have to go find it.
Yeah.
We don't have to cultivate it. We don't grow it. We're inheriting it. It is here. It's more like us tapping into it or tuning into it.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, I feel like the thing that's keeping me sane. This year, something else that's so interesting is in an Eastern way, in the biblical world, in the rabbinics, rest is a form of worship.
Which, we don't. Or our version of worship is very linear. It's like I'm in church on a Sunday. I'm got maybe my hands in the air, singing some praise and worship music.
Yes.
That's what that looks like versus, because I've talked about that even with the work is worship.
Yes.
Rest is worship. It's just the posture in which you enter into that. So what does that practically look like for you when you say that, as the work increases, so we'll have to the Sabbathing and the resting? What does that look like?
It's looked different down through the years. I wrote the Sabbath Feast, the Sabbath series. It's about 8 years old now.
Is it really?
It is.
Yeah.
It's crazy to even hear myself say that. But I've tried to practice it in different ways.
Sure.
And I think that in the East, a phrase that they use that you'll see that Jesus would have known very well is the blessing is in the wrestling. Oh. It's wrestling with the idea of something.
Yeah.
In Judaism, a disciple is known by their questions, not their answers. So we prize people when they get the A+ or the 100 on their test. In Jesus's world, you're known for your questions. And so just sit in that for a minute. That you're doing great if you show up with a bunch of questions. Jesus
Meanwhile, people are scared to ask questions.
Right.
I think about my clients and I'm telling them stand up, ask a question.
Yes.
You don't have to know everything. It's okay to be confused.
Yes. So you're asking me how have I practically you've been trying to walk these things out. I think it's been a commitment to just wrestle with how do I integrate the reality of Sabbath and a Shabbat rhythm in my life.
Yeah.
So at times it has looked like me one night a week. For me, it was a Sunday night. As a Christian, I go to church on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Jews, their Shabbat services on a Saturday. But inviting friends over and sitting around my fire pit at night, and maybe I'll throw out a theme that they all know all week. Come to my house Sunday night. We're going to Sabbath together. We're going to have Minuah. That's that celebration of restoration. And I want you to come with a story, one of your God stories of how God provided for you in a season financially. And then maybe another week it was come. Because what it does is it makes them remember all week.
It's so
to
good.
find their story.
That. Yes,
so don't just come. We're going to drink wine and eat cheese and sit outside, but bring your story.
Yeah.
Or bring a story of a time God answered a prayer. Or bring a story of a time you were in the pit, depressed, broke down, busted up, went through something awful, and God began lifting you or restoring you. Bring those stories. And we would just sit around, and I practiced that rhythm for a few months, and it was glorious. Yeah. I feel like
it's such
truly
a faith-building exercise. I'm tearing up as we're talking about it. It's so true, though. It's such a faith-building exercise that I feel like we're just – because I feel like that in my life right now, that's kind of the season I desperately have been wanting and needing and wanting to be in that season of reflection, remembrance, and celebration. And it has been so hard to even get myself into that because of the burnout that I've experienced. And so – I love that. So it was a different theme every single week that you guys would have.
How amazing is Kristi? Her teaching has absolutely blown my socks off, helped me see my work differently, and made the Bible come to life for me. I learned so much from recording this episode with her. Now, because we know you're going to feel inspired by this episode too, we wanted to create a little something to help you dive in further. Hit pause on this podcast and head straight over to jennaviviano.com/Sabbath to download your free copy of our 5-day Sabbath devotional. I'm a firm believer that we should bring the word into our work. And so my hope is that this devotional will encourage your faith, calm your anxiety, and see what God has to say about rest. I know that when I take a step back from my workday to reflect and celebrate all the restoration God has done in my life and career, I have the strength to press forward when things get hard, because they do. So if you're with me, head on over again to jennaviviano.com/Sabbath to download your free copy of our 5-day Sabbath devotional. Now, back to Kristi.
So talk to me a little bit about the common misconceptions about Sabbathing. We just kind of mentioned that it's not necessarily a nap. What other things do you feel like people think about when they think about Sabbath that might not be correct?
So just in a general scope of things, our Western way, we tend to diminish biblical words and biblical ideas.
What do you mean?
We make them smaller.
Yeah.
So back to when we think of Sabbath, we think of rest or we think of Sunday. We don't think celebration of restoration. We don't
it's a much bigger thing.
That's right. And we do it with everything. Take the word shalom. We all know that good Hebrew word, but if you ask a Western American Christian, what does shalom mean? They will say peace.
Yeah.
And shalom in Hebrew is infinitely deeper and richer and more. It carries the idea of harmony, of wholeness, of flourishing, of universal delight, things being the way they were meant to be. Yeah. And when you have harmony, wholeness, flourishing, you feel peaceful.
Yeah.
Peace is almost the verb of shalom, not its meaning.
Right.
And so just like with shalom, Sabbath, it's so much more. It's so much deeper. It's so much wider. Yeah. And so some of our misconceptions comes back to our Western way of every time I teach the Sabbath series, people are like, so what do I do?
Yeah, literally.
How do I do Sabbath?
Yeah.
Kristi, what do I do? How do I do the Sabbath correctly? How do I do it rightly? How do I do it biblically? I want to do it scripturally. Which is back to the almost, what does it teach me about me?
Yes. It's so easy I'm even thinking about people on this. They're probably going to be thinking, what's your 5-step plan, Jenna, for us to do this afterwards? Do you have a freebie on that? Yeah.
Well, and I think to speak into some of our culture, and this just isn't America, but it certainly exists in America. We really respect and prize hard work. Yeah. Something that I think is interesting. You know, you were asking about Sabbath rhythm. Something that I've done now for years is scheduling times of Sabbath, whether it's a 24-hour period or time away. It has looked different. Sometimes every morning at 5 a.m., Chester and I go for a walk, and I don't listen to anything. I don't have earbuds in my ears. I'm not listening to a podcast, and I'm not even necessarily praying. I am just taking a walk with God and my dog to begin my day.
I mean, that's just, you've been doing that for how many years now?
Yeah, since I got Chester. So almost 12. Chester actually started that rhythm of the 5 a.m. walk for me. And I tell people all the time, the best ideas I ever have, I don't really have them. I receive them.
They're deposited.
Yes. Yeah. It's like an inheritance.
Yeah. You need the rest in order to get deposits in.
Yes.
For sure.
For the next things.
Yeah.
And again, we just don't. So it's interesting so I have times of rest scheduled. Yeah. So sometimes people will be like, Kristi, what's going on Thursday? And I'm like, I'm taking the morning to rest. Well, are you sick?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or wait, are you, it's like, we don't even, if somebody is resting, something is wrong.
I know. I was listening to a podcast actually with Annie F. Downs, and I honestly am totally blanking on who the guest was. I think it was Andrew Ripp. Don't quote me on that, folks. But he was talking about how he basically took a long period of time off, and people would ask him the question, what are you doing? What are you working on? And he's like, nothing. I'm working on resting. And it's just and it reminds me of how much my identity is in my work, because that is a hard thing for me to say. I'm just resting, and to not feel guilty for that. I can hear people in the back of my head you're your own business. Aren't you going to move forward? You've got all these things going on. You have all the to-do list could be laundry. I mean, it could be forever long, right? And it's taking the responsibility to say, I need rest. I need to spend time with the Lord. And that's actually more beneficial than the working portion of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, back to Hebrew, the way to move forward, like you were talking about, you know, I'm my own business, I need to move it forward. The way to move forward is to remember. Like the command to remember or to do not forget is all throughout scripture. And what's interesting is in Hebrew, the Hebrew phrase for to remember is zakar. And it carries the idea of looking back, remembering God's faithfulness in your story thus far. And that gives you courage to step forward. Remembering is a forward moving thing.
I needed to hear that this morning.
We think of remembering as looking back, and that's it. But biblical remembering is pausing, ceasing, Shabbating, Sabbathing, to remember God's faithful record in your life thus far, how he has not failed you yet. And it gives you insight, it informs, it encourages, it empowers, it restores, it lifts you to step forward. Remembering in the Bible is a forward moving thing. And we are a forgetful people. Spiritual amnesia is just part of the human condition, which is why I think God so often says, remember, remember, remember. So, you know, a huge, I think, misconception about Sabbath is that it's just rest or just a day off. And then people get all wonky, like, well, what day? Is it Saturday? Is it Sunday? Like what? But I work on Saturdays and Sundays. And it's tapping into and finding, just like we find with our bodies, you know, oh, I'm on a keto diet or I'm a vegetarian because that works best for my body. What Sabbath rhythm works for your soul?
Yeah, that's good.
And that is a question of discipleship, I think, for the Western follower of Jesus and just people in general. Whether explicitly biblical language or not. Just what are going to be your rhythms of Sabbath.
That's so good. Rebecca Lyons, who was in our group earlier, she recommended a book, Rest, I think when we were in the Wealth of the Wilderness discipleship group that we were kind of in. What would you call that group? Was it like a discipleship group, leadership? It was the best thing ever.
Transformational table for female leaders.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was. Awesome. It was so great. But she recommended the book Rest. I don't know if you remember her talking about that. I listened to it on audio and it was awesome. And I finally finished it. I'm going to re-listen to it because she talks a lot about just the most creative. It's not even from a biblical perspective, but even just from a secular quote unquote perspective, the most creative people that we know about, the biggest inventors that we know about, they all had these rhythms where they early mornings, kind of what you were just talking about. They went on walks. They had rest in the afternoon. They took naps. They had seasons of like purely getting off of work. Like they were talking about this gentleman who had this creative agency, and every 7 years he takes a year off. He closes, shuts down his business. And he said it has helped him increase revenues. Actually, best ideas come that way. He has more clarity. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I need to hear all of this right now. But it's so relevant, not even just from the biblical standpoint, but it makes sense that it enters and starts from there as well.
Well, and I think you can take it, I don't know if it's a layer deeper, but you know, when I'm teaching these things at the feast or when I'm teaching my students at the college, I talk about the difference in the kingdom of entertainment and the kingdom of celebration, or we might say the culture of entertainment and a culture of celebration.
What's the difference?
So, you know, back to we're infinitely more Athens and Rome. When you look at Greco-Roman culture, they are a culture of entertainment. You're talking the theaters, the hippodromes, the Roman bathhouses, all of that. And being entertained is you're in a passive state. You're sitting there.
It's true.
You're
watching a movie, Netflix, scrolling through Instagram. Yep.
That's right. And so a culture of celebration is active.
Yeah, that's so good.
It activates your mind. It activates your heart. It activates your soul.
Yeah.
It often activates your body.
Yeah.
If you're cooking because you're having people over or you're cleaning off your back patio, getting ready. But it's the difference in living your life on your heels or on the balls of your feet.
I love that analogy.
And we're such a culture of entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, we numb ourselves with television, with all of this that we've told ourselves is restful.
Which is not at all. It's actually making us more on hamster wheels.
Yes. It's a passivity where, you know, I can remember some of those Sunday nights, honestly, because hospitality is not like the highest thing in my gifting. So it's work for me to prepare for people to come over. It doesn't come natural
But you always make people feel very welcome, for the record. So hospitality does not always look like a pretty place setting.
Never. It's paper plates. And
hospitality is kind of like how Sabbath is the posture, hospitality is posture. So just want to give that little
Thank
aside.
You for that. That encourages me, because I'm always freaking out 30 minutes before people come over. But even, pushing through some of that to set that table for people to come and to sit around the fire pit. There would be days it felt a little bit laborisome, or some of my insecurities would creep in.
Yeah.
I'm really going to invite all these people to my house. And
it's vulnerable.
It is. Yeah. There's a whole thing in it. But what it was not was passive.
Yeah.
It was active.
It
required me to be alive, awake, tuned in, engaged, other-centric, other-focused.
Yeah.
It just enlivened a different part of me than if I would have spent those Sunday nights watching anything. Yeah. And I have a television. I love movies.
Of course,
I just took my mom to see a movie for Mother's Day. I mean, I go to football games. And, I'm part of this culture. But when we really start trying to drill down to what will my rest rhythms be, I think it's important that they be anchored in celebration and not entertainment.
Yes, I love that. That's so good. That's giving me even some things to chew on for what I have in this next season for myself personally, and knowing that it's time to take some time for that I call it deposit time, the soak time, because I feel like that is where you just have to celebrate all that God has done so much in my life in the past 6 months, year, 2 years, 3, entire life, right? But especially in the past couple of months. And I feel like it's been the celebration. You need to pause to be able to do that, to really see what he's done and to remember that, because I don't want to forget it. Yep. I don't want to miss it. I love that. So where specifically in the Bible, you're the queen of the Bible.
Oh boy, I need Chester for this one.
Where can we read about Sabbath for those people that maybe aren't as familiar with Scripture?
Just a couple of passages. And by the way, I love this in the East. Yeah. We talk about biblical stories.
Sure.
They call them pearls. Oh, every biblical story is a pearl. It's beautiful. It's of great price. It's of great worth. Yeah. But what's more beautiful than a pearl is a string of pearls together in a necklace. And that's the story of the Bible. Yeah. It's all the pearls strung together. So a couple of pearls for people that want to go just look at it in Scripture. Sure. Genesis 1:1 through chapter 2, verse 3. Then we see it again in Exodus when we come there. Exodus 16. It's very interesting. The first time we have the introduction of the word Sabbath, it's in a desert where God starts providing manna for his people.
I love that story. It makes me cry every time you tell it.
It's in the anchoring of again. Yeah. Are you going to live as an orphan?
Yeah.
Are you going to live in your sonship?
Sure.
And when we're in a desert together, when we are in a wilderness together, do you believe that you will walk out of your tent every morning for 40 years and there will be something on the ground that looks like coriander seed with honey and you'll eat it, even though you don't know what it is, because you know it came from the hand of God.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's where Sabbath gets introduced as a word in the story.
I love that.
Then in Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue, Sabbath is number 4. We've already talked about that. Yeah. Then you see it again in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And then it goes all the way in. It's all in Hebrews chapter 4. Yeah. You see it again. But I do have to say this because it's just awesome. As a Western people, when we view time, we're very linear. Yep. The Jewish people, the biblical world, they view time as cyclical. Everything is coming back around. That deep and ancient restoration that we are celebrating that's so inherent to Sabbath. So I don't know if you ever thought about this, but the Bible begins in a garden. And it ends in a city with a garden.
I never did think about that.
We're going kind of back to something. And Adam and Eve ate fruit that broke the world in Genesis 3. Yeah. And Revelation 22, in the new city that's coming, there are trees, and the Bible says their fruit heals the nations. Yeah. Yes. What kind of fruit
is that?
Heals nations.
Yeah.
And so we see the Bible is a story of restoration.
Yeah. The threads throughout it, making this
That's
perfect
exactly
tapestry.
right. It's through eating. It was through the portal of eating that sin entered the world.
Yeah.
It's also through the portal of eating that we have fellowship, table fellowship, and we're going to eat fruit at the end of it all, whether it's the wedding supper of the Lamb, the great banquet that God is preparing a place for us, or that fruit that heals the nations. But so much of Sabbath is remembering that we are in this cyclical story of salvation, restoration, renewal, resurrection, glorification. We are all going to fool around and make it because of who God is.
Yeah.
Not because we were smart enough. Not because we figured it out. We're going to fool around and we're going to make it because of who God is.
Yeah.
And that is the story of the Bible in a sentence. God did not come to turn things upside down. Jesus didn't come to turn things upside down. Jesus came to turn things right side up.
Yeah.
A restoration is underway.
Yeah.
And we live our lives. I mean, I've got to pay bills today.
Sure.
I've got to run some errands. I ran some errands before you came.
Yeah.
I've got deadlines. I've got to get on my computer.
Sure.
I think Chester's almost out of food. Like my life is my life.
Yeah.
Taking three teams this fall. There's a lot to do.
A lot going on.
And in my life, like what is so restorative is carving out that time to Shabbat. Yeah. To cease and to remember that story.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. The Bible starts in a garden. It ends in a city with a garden with fruit so powerful it'll heal the nations.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to taste that fruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are too.
We're going to taste that fruit.
We are going to taste that fruit. And in some ancient way, all is well. And in some ancient way, all will be well against everything we see, against everything we experience, all we feel, all that's broken us in half. Yeah. We are going to fool around and make it because of who God is. And that's the heart of Sabbath.
That is the heart of Sabbath. I think I can't even think of a better way to close than that. You just drop the mic and we can walk out right now.
Chester's like, check.
I love it. Well, Kristi, thank you so much for just chatting with me. I just missed you in general. And so I'm just happy that we got to do this. And what a fun thing that I get to share with other people is you and all that you kind of teach us about the Bible and you make it really come 3D. So if people want to follow along and kind of connect with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. The easiest way is just to go to our website. It's newlandsbiblicalstudies.com.
Yep.
There's some free teachings there. Yeah. All of our series are available for purchase and download.
Yep.
So that you can listen and listen again and again and again.
Yep.
As these things begin to get in you.
Awesome. We're going to have all that stuff in the show notes. Thank you again, Kristi. And we will see you in another episode of the Your Career Story podcast. Thanks. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to Your Career Story podcast. I would love to get to meet you. And there are a couple of ways that we can connect in between episodes. First and foremost, I love my LinkedIn. Second is via Instagram. And third is over on my website. I actually have a special spot just for you full of fun, free resources. So all you have to do is go to www.geneviviano.com/resources. Super simple for a bunch of freebies that will help you boost your career. Hope to see you next week.